as we go into the keyframe. And so as this comes in, it kind of slows down before it stops. Isn't that nice? Comes in fast, slows down before it stops. And so this is the interface that you can use to get really detailed with your keyframes. Now, it's possible that this panel is going to change in the future. I've recommended that they actually put all of this down here because it makes a lot more sense to be able to move this based on our timeline rather than moving things back and forth on this grid where you don't really have any idea of the actual timing of things. And so if you're watching this video in the future and you're like, there is no keyframes panel here, or it looks different or something, just look around. Some of these buttons up here might be down here. We'll see. You should be able to click on this expand button, and that will give you a undocked keyframe editor here. That gives you a really nice interface for working with your keyframes. Again, that button might be down here in the future. Who knows? The keyframes panels, this one and this one, are brand new to Resolve when I'm recording this. So if it's slightly different on your version, that might be a thing. But either way, it should pretty much work the same. You move your keyframes back and forth to change the timing, and you adjust the curve to ease the keyframes. There are similar tools to this in the Fusion page, which we'll go over in a little while, but that's how you animate things here on the edit page. There are so many more things that I want to tell you about the edit page, but we have to move on. This should be plenty to get you started grabbing the footage and putting it into a timeline and creating a story. This is the magic of video editing, is that you're in control of that story. So good. Next, let's jump into the cut page, which is just a little bit of a different angle on the same kind of idea of creating a story in a timeline. So the cut page. The cut page is kind of like the edit page, but it's built for a slightly different application. You can think of the cut page as sort of like a version of the edit page, but designed with one value in mind: speed of editing. Everything in this page is designed to help you edit faster. Now, it has some pretty familiar elements. We have our media pool up here, which works pretty much exactly like the media pool does in the other pages. The only difference is that instead of a bin list, you have a little drop down here, but pretty much the same idea. We have a viewer. You can double click on a clip and you can hover scrub. You can scrub through it here in the source viewer. You can switch to source tape and bring up all of the different clips one after another. You can also switch to the timeline viewer. So there aren't two viewers in the edit page. There's only one that kind of switches out like this. But other than that, it pretty much works the same. We do have an inspector. Same idea, but we also have kind of this slightly different style of inspector, which if you click on this button right here, will bring up a bunch of controls that are the same as the inspector controls, but they're kind of just on a different interface. The idea being that this would be a little bit faster. We also have effects and titles and even a keyframes editor like we do on the edit page. There's transitions, that kind of thing. But really the big difference here in the cut page versus the edit page is that we have two timelines. We have this upper timeline here, and we have the lower timeline down here. Now, this can be a little bit confusing, but these are the same timeline at different zoom levels. So this upper timeline is your entire movie from beginning to end. So it's zoomed all the way out. The lower timeline is the zoomed in version of that same sequence. And so if I want to adjust this part where we have a transition, I can quickly move to that part using this top timeline. And then I can adjust the details of the clips here in the lower timeline. And so the idea here is that you can quickly move from one side of the world to the other without having to zoom in and out a whole bunch, because that does take some time to zoom in and out and kind of get the right view for what you're working on. The other thing you might notice is these little indicators here, where if we have a clip, let's just open a clip like this, we have this little animation here that's kind of shooting little arrows down here. And we also have this green highlight. This is our edit indicator. And what that means is that if we use some of these edit buttons, which are very similar to the edit buttons you get over here in the edit page, but if we use one of these edit buttons, some of these have to do with a specific edit point. So for instance, this insert button, this smart insert, what it's going to do is look for the nearest edit point, which is going to be highlighted in green, and that's where it's going to insert the clip. Normally, on the edit page, if I were to be right over this title and I were to insert this like this, that's going to throw that right in the middle of that clip, exactly where my playhead is. just like that. In the cut page, because it takes time to completely line this up exactly where you want it to be, it's just going to put this on the nearest edit point. So if I grab this right here and I say Smart Insert, that's going to put that right there in between those two clips. It's not going to put it exactly where the playhead is. If I have that playhead less than 50% through this clip, we're going to highlight this edit point, and that's where whatever clip I have selected is going to be inserted. So this is the kind of thing that can get you in trouble, but if you're aware of it and kind of the thinking behind why this is built this way, then it can actually be really helpful and speed you up. Sort of a similar thing with this edit point is with our transitions. There's these 3 buttons right here, and this will allow you to quickly select the type of transition that you want for this edit point. And so by default, it's a cut, but with one click, I can add a crossfade here. And so I could just go to the nearest edit point and go, okay, I want a crossfade here. I want one here. I want one here. And you can really easily just add these kind of things, and you can see how quickly you can go through and do stuff. And so there are a lot of cool things about just editing a normal project in the cut page. It's a little bit of a different feel. You have to get used to it, but for certain applications, it can really speed you up. Something like putting together a narrative film is maybe not something that I would do in the cut page. The cut page would be really great for a vlog or a news story where you're trying to, 1, move really fast and probably get it out as quickly as you can. And 2, you generally just have a bunch of clips one after another, and you don't have complicated sound design and, all kinds of different layers and stuff like that. It's just one clip after another. And so because that's kind of such a specific application, we're not going to spend lots and lots of time on the cut page. It's sort of a divisive page, honestly. Some people really like it, and some people don't see a point in having the cut page at all. Me, I use this for some things. It's nice for quickly putting a whole bunch of clips down into the timeline and creating kind of a rough edit, but I'll generally move over to the edit page to kind of refine my edits and make sure that my audio tracks are good and everything like that. Because the cut page, while there are audio tracks, kind of get rid of our extra tracks here, move my camera here, I can click on this button right here and expand those tracks a little bit, and I can see the audio a little bit better. And I can hold Alt and adjust just the audio like this. And so it's certainly doable, but because of the way the cut page is made, where you don't really have a normal selection tool, you only have the trim tools, it can sort of feel awkward, and you can kind of trim your audio when you don't really mean to sometimes. And it's a little bit awkward sometimes. And so generally, if you're going to do something quick where you have your audio and your video in the same clips, and you're just going to put one right after another, that's what I would use the cut page for. And like I said, it kind of comes down to personal preference. You might find that you really like the way the cut page does things and not having to zoom in or out. And you might find that cutting your videos together in the cut page is really enjoyable. However, especially if you're coming from a different editor like Premiere or something like that, the edit page is going to feel a lot more familiar. Now, the one thing that's really, really great about the cut page is, surprisingly, it's multicam editing. The way it handles multicam is actually really interesting. If you want to follow along, you can go to the master bin right here and open cut. And we have some footage that we're going to cut together on the cut page. Let's make a new timeline. I'll just right click and say create new timeline like this. And we'll say cut page multicam like that. And here we have several different shots of the same production meeting. And so we have 2 kind of medium shot cameras, we have 1 overhead camera, and we have a wide camera. So this is a 4-camera multicam shoot. We also have our audio. This is just an example with multiple cameras, but if you have a multi-camera shoot for, say, a cooking video or a live event or something, this is all going to work the same way. When we have all of these different cameras that happen at the same time, what we can do is we can sync them up with each other and then cut from one camera to the other just to get a kind of a different angle. And there are ways to do this in the edit page. For instance, I can open up this cut page multicam and I can start bringing some of these cameras in here, and I can sync these up with each other just by kind of lining up these audio waveforms. And I could cut from one camera to the other. And make my edit that way, just by kind of stacking these cameras and kind of turning one layer off and kind of trimming it and that kind of thing to cut in between the cameras. But in the edit page, I could also select all of these, right click, and say new multicam clip using selected clips. I'll just uncheck move source clips to original clips bin and hit create. And so there are ways to kind of sync these up and then select the different cameras and kind of cut in between them on the edit page. But it is kind of a pain to set that up. It's a little bit tricky. Let me know in the comments if you want a video on setting up multicam in the edit page. But in the cut page, it kind of simplifies this in that we can select all of these clips and we can click this button right here, which is the sync button. I can select those all and I can sync these by audio and then hit auto sync. And that will sync up all of my clips on this kind of preview timeline. And then we can hit save sync. And what that's going to do is give us a little blue indicator on each of these clips to show that it syncs with some other clip. Once we have that done, we've kind of tagged all of those clips to say, hey, these sync with each other, and here's exactly the time that they should sync with. Once we have that, we can drag any of these clips. Let's just drag this wide clip in. We can drag any of these clips in and just kind of go through it, sort of like the anchor method, like we were talking about. We just have this wide shot and we can look around for something interesting happening. We have Dan reaching for some candy. That's something interesting right here. And so what we can do is go up to our sync bin, and this is going to show live the clips that sync up with this place in our timeline. So right here, when he starts to reach, we can see all of our different angles for what we want. I can hit 3, and that's going to bring up a clip and set an in and out to start right there. I can just drag this down like this, and then it's going to be a perfect cut from one shot to another. Let's go back to our timeline viewer here. So here's one shot. There we go. We can cut back, trim this just like that. And so it's sort of like a hybrid of a multicam and kind of the traditional way of stacking a bunch of clips together. And so what's great about something like this is we can just cut to whatever we think is interesting from this wide shot. And so Sam's talking right here. Again, we can just open up the sync bin. Let's use the shot of Sam talking here. Great. And we can either drag it down or we can use our edit buttons like this place on top. And that's going to put that exactly where it's supposed to be. Switch back to our timeline here. We have him talking. Great. So this is a nice way to be able to use multiple cameras without having to set up a multicam and play through and switch your cameras in real time. You can kind of just scrub through and find the interesting parts. So there's Sam talking again, sync bin. Let's switch to Sam talking. Put that in as a place on top. And now we can cut to Sam as he's talking. Isn't that great? And so if you're doing a lot of multicam stuff, especially if it's something like a live event where you're mostly on a wide shot and then you just want to cut to the interesting parts, this is a really nice way to handle that. There are a lot more features in the cut page, things that we just don't have time to get into. This is kind of the main stuff. But if you're looking to move a lot faster and you're kind of working on a deadline, the cut page might be something to really look into and learn a little bit more about, especially if you're doing these certain kinds of multicam edits. This can be really helpful. But a lot of the basics here are pretty much like the edit page. We're still putting clips together into a timeline. We're cutting them, we're trimming them, we're moving things around, we're adjusting the order, and we're building our story here on the timeline. This timeline, whatever we make for our video, this is going to be the bones of our video. It's the main place where all of the clips live, and then everything else that we do in Fusion, Color, and Fairlight are going to be based on this timeline right here. So after you organize your media, you can switch to the edit page or the cut page, depending on what you feel like doing. And you place your clips here on the timeline to create a story. Once you're happy with the story, then you can move on and get fancier with the Fusion, Color, and Fairlight pages, which we're going to dive into next. So let's take a step back and talk about some kind of general workflow here. When you're making a video of some kind, you will record stuff or get footage from a client or online or whatever. And the very first thing that you have to do is manage your media. So it's get it organized, make sure it's renamed if you're going to rename it, put it in folders, tag it, get familiar with it, that kind of thing. From there, it's building a story, which is the strict definition of editing. A lot of people, when they say editing, they pretty much mean this entire workflow. But strictly speaking, editing is adjusting clips in a timeline. So it's actually creating what your movie is going to be. Once you have that, then you can move on to get a little bit fancier and a little bit more detailed. For most videos, that would include things like visual effects, whether it's doing simple things like replacing a screen on a TV digitally, or cloning out a car that's driving through the background of your medieval epic movie, or adding lightsabers and explosions and portals and things like that. That's all visual effects. It would be adding graphics, things like titles and credits and little pop-up icons and things like that. And then generally you'll work on color correction, color grading, making sure that your colors look good, working on your audio, making sure your audio sounds good. Things are loud enough, but not too loud. Things sound like they belong there. Things that should make noise actually make noise. And then finally, we get into rendering, which is saving out your video in a format that other people can watch. It's making a video file and uploading it to YouTube or giving it to your client, putting it on a website, that kind of thing. So this is the whole workflow from start to finish on making a video. And it kind of flows in this general order. And this is really why the buttons at the bottom of the Resolve interface, the pages, are in this order. Because we start with media, then we do our editing, then we do our effects and our graphics in Fusion, we do our color grading in Color, we do our audio mixing in Fairlight, and then we render it out. So for the rest of this video, we're going to get fancy. We're going to do the fancy stuff, starting out with Fusion here in a minute. So I can do my graphics, effects, color, and audio right here in Resolve. And all of these different apps, which are actually just pages in Resolve, all share the same timeline. And it's instantly available to do our really detailed, fancy stuff in those pages. You build your story here on the edit page, and the other pages let you make it even better. So let's dive into Fusion. Go ahead and do this with me. Go over to your media pool in the edit page and open the Fusion bin. So you should have VFX alien plate, house exterior ship plate, etc. Right click anywhere in there and say timelines, create new timeline. And we're just going to call this Fusion timeline. And we'll hit create. You don't have to make a new timeline to work in Fusion. We're just doing this because this is going to kind of be the Fusion demo thing. But take all of these clips. I'll just shift select those and just drag those into the timeline like this. So we have 4 main clips here. We have a little puppet, we have a house, we have the top of the spaceship, and we have a wide shot with kids riding their bikes across this mountain vista. These are the shots that we're going to use to kind of learn a little bit more about Fusion. So make sure that you have these shots added to a new timeline. And we're going to do one special thing. We're going to take this VFX alien plate. We're going to put this up on the second video track and put this right over our VFX ship plate like that. And then we'll just drag this down. So we should have our VFX house exterior, our alien plate, and our ship plate stacked, and our wide shot like this. Let's just open up our wide shot in Fusion. The way that we do that is we're just over it here on the edit page, and then we go down and just click on the Fusion page. That's going to open up this clip here in Fusion. And now we're ready to work with this clip right on our timeline. Now, if you've never used Fusion before, you're probably already a little bit, oh gosh, what is this? This looks completely different than the edit page. What the heck are these things? There's no way I'm ever going to understand this. And believe me, I get it. Fusion can be really intimidating because it's a very different interface than a lot of other apps. The edit page at least sort of looks like something you're familiar with. You know, there's kind of like layers, there's a timeline, you know, you've scrubbed through videos on YouTube. It's sort of familiar, so you can kind of pick it up. But the Fusion page, you're like, what? Why are there little boxes? Don't worry, I'm going to explain everything and move really slow. And pretty soon you're going to say, okay, that's pretty cool. So let's start with the easy stuff. Up here, we have our familiar buttons that open and close panels. And we have the inspector. Look at that. Remember, the inspector is going to show properties of whatever we have selected. More on that in a little bit. Over here, we can open up our media pool, which is exactly how it's been in the other pages. And also our effects, which is very similar as well. We have a list of effects that we can drag down and apply to things. We have a viewer right here. And we have a viewer over here. And these, for now, let's just say these work pretty much like the viewers in the edit page, where on the left, you can open up a clip and kind of preview it. And on the right, this is what the person who watches your video is going to see. By default, it works in a similar way on the Fusion page. There's a viewer over here where we're going to use to pick up little pieces and look at them. And on the right, this is what the person who watches our movie is actually going to see. Down below here, we have sort of a little bit of a different style of a timeline, but it still works. It has a playhead, which is this little red line. And you can drag it back and forth. We have our playback controls, so we can play this, stop it, go backwards. J, K, and L still work, and you can play this back and forth. Really, the only big difference here is that we're looking at one clip. We're not looking at our entire timeline. We're just looking at one clip from our timeline. And so by default, we'll have this loop. And so this will play all the way through and then loop back to the beginning and play again. Here we have our current frame that we're on. And as we scrub, this kind of changes. We also have our beginning and end frames for our composition. And below that, we have a panel, which we call our toolbar. Now, this is a little bit different than our toolbar in the edit page, where when you click a tool, it kind of changes how your mouse reacts to things. This toolbar actually creates tools down here in the nodes. Now, if you don't know what that means yet, that's okay. Basically, here's how it works. You grab an icon and you drag it down here and it will make a little box. Okay? Don't worry about that. Below our toolbar, we have our nodes. This is where the action happens in Fusion. Fusion is all about the nodes. What the heck are nodes? Basically, it's a flowchart of little boxes that you run images through to create whatever you want to make. Now, I know that sounds really generic and doesn't really explain it. So I want to back up for just a minute. Fusion is a compositing tool. Now, what the heck is compositing? Compositing, real strictly speaking, is basically putting images over other images. It's combining elements. So you can think of this kind of like what you would typically use Photoshop for, right? If we're going to make an image with some mountains and a cow and a saucer abducting the cow, we would have different elements here. We would have possibly a shot that looks like this, and then we would add this saucer digitally. Or maybe we just have a shot of some mountains and we put in the cow digitally and we put in the saucer, and then we maybe add a little bit of fancy clouds to the sky. It's putting all of these pieces together to make a really cool visual thing. And something like this, where you're combining photos and you want to make it look real, that's something that we would call like visual effects. Whereas if you're making a title, with 3D text that comes in and flashes, that would be more like a graphic. But visual effects and graphics are Fusion's bread and butter. That's what Fusion does. So if you're wanting to change an image so that it looks different and has different elements in it than it did when you shot it, you're probably going to be compositing in some way. Just like you would take a photo and clone out your weird uncle because you don't want him in the family picture, you can do that kind of thing with video. And Fusion is the place to do it in Resolve. If you've heard of After Effects, Fusion is kind of like Blackmagic's answer to After Effects inside of Resolve. It can do pretty much all the same stuff. So the reason we might take a shot like this into Fusion is if we want to change something about it. Let's just get rid of these nodes for a minute because they're scary. Maybe we want to erase one of these people riding their bike. Maybe we want to add crazy clouds to the sky. Maybe we want to add a flying saucer. Maybe we want to duplicate some trees and fill in these trees a little more. Anything that has to do with kind of changing the actual pixels of the image, that's stuff we would use Fusion for. In our other shots, if we want to make this image look like it was shot at night, we could do a lot of that probably in the color page, but we can do some fancy things in the Fusion page as well, like brighten up these windows or replace them with different windows that have lights in them. We could add a big statue here. Really, the thing that I love about Fusion is that there are no limits to what you can do. In a little bit, one thing that we're going to do in Fusion is take this image and kind of cut a hole in it and then put our little alien guy into the hole of the image so it looks like he's hanging out in this seat, smiling and happy. That's the kind of stuff that you can do in Fusion. So let's go back to our wide shot here. And to make all these kind of things happen, we are going to use nodes. So what is a node? A node is a little box in the Fusion interface that does one job. And what we do is we link all of these boxes together to do a bunch of fancy stuff to our image. So this is basically what a node looks like. The node has one job and it's generally called whatever its job is. So this node's job is to blur things. And there are a couple of different inputs on each node. This is where you would attach other nodes. And the colors of the inputs matter a lot. Generally, most nodes, you would attach a node to a yellow input, but there are also green and blue and other inputs that we'll talk about in a little bit. Once the node does its job, for instance, if you hook up an image to this yellow input, it's going to take that image and blur it. And then you can connect this node to other nodes by taking this little white square and connecting that to the next node. After the image runs through this node, it's going to change the image. And so this image that I connect to the next node is going to be a blurry image because it's already gone through this node. If this is already confusing, that's okay. All you really have to know is that a node is a box with one job. A lot of the students that we work with that are learning Fusion find it's a lot easier to think about nodes like a flowchart. And when you're just starting out, it helps to think of a flowchart for something fun. Like for instance, a recipe. A recipe is nice because there are a series of steps. So if you were going to write out a recipe for lemonade, let's say, number 1 might be get lemons. Step 2 might be squeeze them. Squeeze the juice. 3 would be add the juice to water. 4 would be add sugar. 5 might be mix. And so we can kind of split what we want to do into steps. And we can do this like a flowchart, like get lemons, squeeze juice, add juice to water, add sugar, mix. And these are going to happen in a certain order. And they're going to flow from one to the other. This is pretty much how nodes work in Fusion. So if we were going to make a node chart for getting lemonade, it might look something like this. The difference is that Fusion, you have to tell Fusion everything. It's kind of like you need to give it really specific instructions on exactly what you want it to do because it can't read your mind. So for instance, we have a node here called get lemons. Okay, so I have some lemons. Squeeze the juice. Okay, so I'm squeezing it. Then I add the juice to the water. What water? Where's the water? This is the first time I've ever heard about water. And so what we really need to do is make another node that says get water. So we get lemons and we get water. We squeeze the juice for the lemons and we add the juice to the water. So we need to actually combine these two things. So both of those things happen. We get juice and we get water. Then we need sugar. What sugar? Well, we need to get some sugar. We need to add those, right? So we're mixing two things together. So this is more of a node graph that you would see in Fusion. You get some lemons and you change those lemons by squeezing them. You get some water and you combine it with that squeezed juice. You get this watery juice, you get some sugar and you add those together. Then you stir it, you mix it up. And at the end, you have lemonade. One of the first things I ask our students to do when they're learning Fusion is to make a flowchart for a recipe that they like. So here is a flowchart from one of our students named Ryan that I think is especially great for how to make ramen noodles. And we'll take a look at this and then we're going to come back to it in a little bit because I want to show you something really cool about this. But it's the idea of doing one step at a time. We get a pot, we get 20 ounces of water. We add the water to the pot. We boil the water. We get noodles. We add the noodles to the boiling water for 5 minutes. We drain the water from the pot. We get sauce. We add the sauce to the noodles. We stir fry for 30 seconds. We get flakes. We add the flakes to the noodles. We stir it all up and we serve it, right? So it's thinking about things in steps. That's what's really, really important here. If you can get your mind to start thinking in these little steps, nodes are going to be easy. Let's jump into Fusion and take a look at this. By default, we have a couple of nodes here. And this should already make a little bit more sense. That's what's so great about this, is that once it kind of clicks in your mind, you go, oh, okay. I love seeing that moment with our students. It's awesome. By default, when you open up a clip inside of Fusion from the edit page, you'll have two nodes. You have a very simple flowchart here. And you can think of these nodes as kind of the beginning and the end. Media in has one job, just like all nodes have one job. And that is to take this footage, this clip from the edit page and bring it into Fusion. All right. So that's all it's doing is just importing the footage. So it's kind of bringing that footage in. And then we have a line that connects media in to media out. So it's flowing from left to right. So the next step is media out. Media out, what that does is that takes an image, whatever image you plug into this yellow input, and then it puts it out to the edit page. So really what we're doing here is we're taking an image from the edit page, we're doing nothing with it, and then we're putting it back in the edit page, which is why when we go to the edit page, nothing's changed. Okay? But if we were to add another step here, fancy things right here, then that's going to change this image, and we're going to be putting a different image into the edit page. So if I were to grab maybe this icon right here that looks like a teardrop and drag this down, that's going to make a new node. That's going to make a blur node. All right. I'll get rid of that for a second because I can grab this and drag this down onto this line. And when this line turns blue, I can let go. And what that's going to do is run this image through this blur node. And that's going to change this image. Now, it just changes it a little bit because we're only blurring it a little bit. The reason I know is because when I select this blur node and I go to the inspector, I can see the properties of that blur node. And this blur size is only at 1 pixel. So if I push this blur size up, look, we get a blurry image, okay? So what we're doing is we're bringing a image into Fusion, then we're blurring it 31.5 pixels, and then we're putting it into the media out, which puts this back into the edit page. Now, if we switch over to the edit page, look what happens. We have a blurry image. So what's really cool about this is that we've brought a clip into Fusion, we've changed it in Fusion, and now it's already in our timeline. We don't have to render it out, we don't have to convert it or anything like that. It's just already living there. Now, Fusion can do a lot more fancy things than just blur things, but just go with this for now. We're building a really simple flowchart. Grab an image, blur it, put the image back into the edit page. And this is essentially how you build all the effects inside of Fusion. So take a second and just kind of start to think about, okay, if I want to change an image, I'm going to start running it through certain nodes. I'm going to get rid of this blur node. What kind of node would we use if we wanted to make this whole image pink? We would probably use some kind of color correction or tint node or something like that. And there actually is a node called color corrector, which is right here. And we can grab this and just drag this down, make sure that line turns blue, grab this color corrector and wiggle it and make sure that those connections are actually connected. And then we can select this color corrector and push this little dot towards pink. And look at what happens. We have a pink image. We can switch over to the edit page. We have a pink image. And if you can do that, if you can do just that, you can use Fusion. Even though Fusion can do all this really, really crazy, complicated stuff, it can be as simple as that.